Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this Year 7 webinar on assessment. So glad you can join us here this evening. I've got a couple of panelists with me I'd like to introduce before we get into the presentation. The first one you're going to introduce is, well, you can introduce yourself, Guy.
Yeah, good evening, parents. Lovely to join you and lovely to see a few parents this morning for the open event. I am Guy Hewson. I am the Director of Learning for Pre-16 students. So my responsibility is to support your children as they move through the pre-16 years of West Island School, both pastorally and academically. And I'm ably supported by Miss Kelly, who is the head of year, who also can introduce herself.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Patty Kelly, and I'm head of year 7. And I've really enjoyed the last 7 weeks building relationships and getting to know your children. We've lots of exciting things ahead, including Horizons Week, which I'll be in touch with more information in due course. But in the meantime, I'll hand back to Mike. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty. So I'm Mike Williams, Vice Principal. One of my roles is leading up assessment. So this is what I'm going to talk to you about this evening. You will see at the bottom of the screen there, you have a Q&A button. If you want to press that at any time to ask any questions, then that's fine. I would advise you leave it till the end of the presentation because we might cover your question during the presentation. And Guy and Patty will join us at the end of the presentation, which should take about half an hour. And also, Clare, Haworth, my VP colleague, will also join us. I think near the end, she's in the meeting at the moment, so couldn't quite get it for the start. So without further ado, start, if I can remember how to do this thing. Okay, so today we're going to go through these three things: immediate baseline assessment data. Now, you should have received this data on your child already. Don't worry if you're a bit confused about it. That's what tonight's about, to take you through it. We're also going to talk about how we assess and put it on what we call the FAR, through Wisdom or virtual learning environment, and also particular at what's the assessment like throughout NYP. In West Island School, we do NYP from year 7 to 9, so it's the same type of assessment all the way through those 3 years. So important dates for you there. You've already met your child's teachers on the parents' evening in October. You will also have another parents' evening in the end of June. We have this second parents' evening instead of having an end of year report, because we've had feedback that you valued actually talking to the teachers rather than getting a written report, because you could have a conversation and a back and forward conversation rather than a one-way report which you can't respond to. Also, we have the main assessment points for year 7. In fact, you'll find it's the same for year 7, 8 and 9. We give a report twice throughout the year. So we call this semester 1 and semester 2, semester being half a year. So at the end of the start of February, we will do what we call the OLAs, overall levels of achievement for your children, and that will be available on Wisdom. And we'll also do the same for the whole year at the end of June, the end of year, when we finished all of the assessments. I want to talk to you then about the MIDIAS test that your children did at the start of the year. These tests are administered now by KEM, which is part of the Cambridge Examination Suite. It used to be part of the University of Durham, but that's changed in the last few years. They've been going for many, many years, and they've got millions of pieces of data from students. It's usually it's a UK-based system, so you'll usually find this in UK schools, independent, especially UK independent schools, and also international schools which have a UK-based curriculum. I've had some questions from you already about what type of test is this? Is it the same as the PSAT test, which is an American kind of system? Is it like an IQ test? And this is what I'll be taking you through now. We do like this assessment very much because it's very quick, and there's one particular thing that this has going for it, which is its computer adaptive test, which I'll go through in a second. Your children will do this in year 7, year 10 and year 12. So the things we use these baseline tests for. One of them is for your individual child to look at their strengths and weaknesses. In particular, we're looking for their strengths in maths and literacy and in vocab, which is kind of numeracy and literacy are the pillars of all education. You need those two things to progress in any subject. So they're the two main parts it looks at. And we can have a look at your child's relative strengths in those two things and other aspects, which I'll talk about in a minute. Also, we can use these tests to predict to outcomes, not really that relevant in year 7, 8 and 9, but we can also predict to GCSE from these mid-years tests. But we don't really use the mid-years test to predict to GCSE because your children will do the tests again. Similar test called Yellis in year 10, which we use to predict to GCSE. And finally, we look at these baseline tests, but on a school-wide basis, to see how we are doing in school compared to other schools, and on a subject by subject basis. So I talked about being computer adaptive. This is very important because what the test does is when students get questions right, it makes the question harder, and it just keeps going till it gets to a really, really difficult question, which I'll be showing you soon. It will be a audience participation, so get ready with your thinking caps. And when they get the question wrong, the questions get easier, so it can test those really higher areas, and also students who don't get many questions right really makes the questions easier each time. So there's 4 main components there, as I said: vocabs, maths, non-verbal and skills. Non-verbal, I'll give you some questions in a minute, is kind of like spatial awareness. Skills are perceptual speed and proofreading. And I'll go into that in more detail. So that's the computer adaptive. What happens is the program converges eventually to a score which your child will get, because they keep getting the harder ones wrong and the easier ones correct around that level. And because there's millions of questions that have been asked over the years, the questions are really good because they make sure they only keep choosing the questions that are differentiating. So differentiating means that the questions that a less able student would get wrong and a more able student would get right. If you've got students, doesn't matter if they're less able or more able getting it right or wrong, it's kind of random. That's not very differentiating or not very good question. So that's the advantage of a paper-based test, because it can't really search into those lower and higher areas. So let's start with the audience participation bit. VJ, our IT manager, has done this quiz for you. I've provided the questions, he's provided this quiz. So you can see on the screen there now, we've got survey A, B, C, and D. What do you think that on the left-hand side, the picture represents? What's the closest right-hand side word to that picture? So this would be a really easy question, obviously. So I invite you to press A, B, C, and D, A being shrimp, B being prawn, etc., etc. So 95% of you thought it was a crab, 5% of you thought it was a shrimp. It is actually a crab, but good try if you thought it's a shrimp. Not far off, quite close, they're both crustaceans. We have a second question. I'll do that bit. So this is vocab now. We're starting getting harder questions. This would be a kind of medium difficulty question. Hopefully you can see the question. You can move the survey answers around the screen if you can't see. So I'll give you about 10, 15 seconds. Which one closely matches the word on the left? Okay, VJ, I think that's enough time. So 55% you went cautiously. Let's see what the answer was. It was, well done, 55% of you. So you can see already we're taking words out of context here, which is important because you infer the meaning of words from the context you read them in. This is why reading is so important, especially at the age of your children, because this is how they get to know words they read. But once you take the words out of context, do they actually know the meaning of the words? And the only way they can improve is by reading more. And it's a thing I'll say quite a lot of times today, is reading is so important at this age, because you are writing, you need to know what words actually mean. So you get that one right, questions get more and more difficult. Ten seconds. Okay. We got split decision. Peerless. Is it friendless? Kind of makes sense, right? It pairs your friends. Or is it incomparable? Or incomparable? It's incomparable. I can imagine people at home now going, I told you it was that one. Why did you press that? So it's starting to get more and more difficult. This is about when I did this test. Your children have done this assessment. Some of them have got these questions right. And a lot of these questions, which are difficult, they've got them right. That's why they've got a really high score. So sinecure. Not sure many people will get this right. Okay, BJ. So 44% charity. So this is the most popular answer. Sorry, 44% easy job. Well done. Wow. That's very impressive. I've never seen, I would not be able to get that right if I didn't know the answer myself. So well done. So that's the vocab, and you can see the questions get harder and harder. Paper test won't really be able to search that really high areas. So this is the maths. Again, it's not based on what they've learned in class. It's kind of more problem solving, but you know, it is a little bit of curriculum knowledge here. This is an easy maths question. I think, BJ, I think everyone should get this right. So we can have the answers. Okay. 73% view, 2/3. Hopefully it's the right answer. Now the questions get harder. If you get that right, the questions get harder. So percentages, I imagine most year 7 students will get this correct. Actually, not being a maths teacher, I don't know. I'm assuming there. 97% of you, no percentages, well done. Do you know your geometry? Okay, BJ. 75% of you going for 35 degrees, well done. We're kind of hanging on in there. What about algebra? This is obviously done without a calculator. There's no calculators allowed. And rearranging equations, which is extremely important in my subject in physics. You know, so it's a really good skill. Okay. Well done, I think. Yeah, 85% of you. Now it's starting to get quite difficult. Okay. Oh, only one person answered that. Probably not enough time, sorry. Yeah, so work out the value of P. So if trial and error, if you put M in as 0, then Q to the power M, anything to the power 0 is 1. Therefore, the function M is equal to 2. Just on that first line. So there's a lot of spurious information there. You just need to that first line. So it's kind of more problem solving than being able to be fantastic at maths. This is an interesting one. I'll try and give you a bit more time this time to work this one out. No calculators. Okay, let's go, VJ. So we've got 22 of you answering, and you've gone for 5,150, the bottom one. Well done. That's really good. That's really good. So if you imagine you times the 0.003 by 1,000, just make it easy. Just make it 3. And remember, you times by 1,000, and then you just divided 15 by 3. It's 5.15, but you need to times by 1,000 again. That's 5,150. This is a quite nice one. I think this is the last one. This would be a quite hard maths question. They do get harder, actually. Next year, I'm just going to put a really hard maths question. I'll give you a couple of minutes, maybe a minute to do this one. Okay, VJ. So 21 people and 16 out of 21 got 500. The answer is 500. Well done. Well done. So 14% went by bus. If it was 1,000 people, that'll be 140,000 people altogether. It'll be 140 people going by bus as a percentage. So just half the number of people, make it 500 people, and that would be 70 children. Yeah, your children, a lot of your children could do this no problem, and they're really, really quite clever at maths. They do get harder. So moving on to non-verbal, as I say, in spatial awareness, one of the things they have to do is cross sections here, and you can see on the left hand side you've got 2 little circles, and which diagram on the right hand side with that cross section through it gives you those 2 little circles. And for some of you, this will be really easy, but actually there'll be half the people out there that can't see it because the spatial awareness works quite strangely. But this non-verbal shows you good kind of ability in obviously things like design technology, artistic ability, or be able to see things in certain ways. Also in science, when you're working with graph work, it's quite important. And any way you present things in a non-numeric or not with writing. Okay, so that one. And this is quite an interesting one. Do we have a survey for this, BJ? Can't remember. Yes, we do. So they do this blocks one where they have to say looking at the diagram there, you can see there are big blocks, which are 2 by 1, and small blocks, which are 1 by 1. So what is the smallest in that diagram? What is the smallest number of small blocks possible? So what's the least small blocks that must be there to create that diagram? So you can obviously see 1 closest to you on the top. Okay, the answer is 3. What did we get in the survey? Good. Most of you got that one right. 35% of people got that right. Oh, sorry, give you the answer there. Adding the pictures together, again, spatial awareness, your brain working things out and seeing what they will look like if you add something together. There's the answer there. So that was non-verbal. The last set of tests are skills, and one of the 2 parts of skills is proofreading. So they have about probably 30 seconds or maybe to do this text and to come up with all the mistakes in the text, as many as they can. Oh, I should have done it. Let me take that off. See, have a read through it, see how many you can find. So punctuation, spelling, capitalization. Okay, there's all the mistakes there. So they have to click on everything they think is a mistake, but they have to do it quite quickly. So it's their ability to spot mistakes in their work as they're going through it. And the other skill is perceptual speed and accuracy. This is, you can see that it doesn't seem to be, to me, it doesn't seem to be a difficult thing to do, just to read those 4 letters out and then to compare them to the right-hand side. But it's actually a skill which is developed very much around the age of your children, and it's called tracking. So what they do is they take a kind of a picture or remember something like a sequence of letters, hold it in their visual memory, move their eyes over to somewhere else, and can they replicate that? Can they remember that? And this is extremely important in assessments, because in an assessment you have to read something and then write something down somewhere else. So you need that good visual memory, and you need to work kind of at speed to remember things, because you can't keep going back and checking what you've read. So the skill score is quite important at that age, and we'll have a look at some diagrams to show you how to read the skill score from your children. Hopefully you got that one. One more. Yeah. Okay. The scores for all of those 4 parts, vocab, maths, non-verbal, and skills, the maximum score is 150. And the average score is 100. This is what it means by standardized. And in West Island School, the average is slightly higher than 100. So 100 means kind of, because it's based in the UK, it means the average UK student ability. So in West Island, our average score is around about 110. Sorry, this diagram's quite a bit skewed, but you can get the idea there. So we work best by working in percentiles. So a score of over 135 is in the 99th percentile, which means better than 99% of students, which is the top 1% of students. That's what we call nationally or on the kind of UK child basis. So if you're about 110 for each of these skills, it's kind of average in West Island School, but 100 is average throughout the world, or average UK student. Don't worry about that A, B, C, and D for the moment. We're just looking at percentiles. Now, when I sent you the information by email, I gave you a link also to this great booklet, which gives lots of different scenarios of IPRs, individual pupil records, which was these kind of dot and whiskers diagrams that you were sent. So if you wanted to go into a detailed analysis, do have a look inside that document. I put the link down there, but I'm aware you can't click it at the moment. I will also send this out again, this webinar out tomorrow. I'll put it on the website and the link will be there as well. Do have a look in this document. It is a really great document. So on the left-hand side there, you've got the kind of what you would expect maybe for an average an average West Island school student. And I'm going to go through some different scenarios here. Between on the bottom there, where it says standard score, average, as I said, is 100. Highest is 150, and 2/3 of students nationally or UK based are between 85 and 115. So if you're outside that, you're either very high or very low. So this here would again be the average kind of West Island student, around about 105, 110. It varies from year to year. The year I put this together, last year, I think, this was 105 as our average. And what you're looking at there is you're saying this child is very balanced. I'm looking at vocab and maths in particular. Things I'm looking out for here are vocab and maths balanced, or is one higher than the other? Because it should be that we find that, or can find that students who've got a high vocab score also have a high maths score. Where we can do something about it is when they're different. And I'm looking at the skill score. The skill score only alerts me if it's quite low. A low skill score may cause problems in assessments for reasons we talked about before. The median score at the end is the overall score. It just comes from the maths and the vocab score. It's not an average. It's called a ranked average, but it comes from the vocab and maths score. So here we talked about this student here is exceptionally good at maths, 99th percentile, but this vocab is just 35th percentile. This may be a student who is a student working in their second, third, or even fourth language, which we have, who hasn't quite grasped a lot of English vocab yet, because these are English words out of context. So you would expect at West Island they would their scores in these, if they were coming in at this level, they would be doing English EAL or EAP to improve their English, because at the moment English is their limiting factor within their subjects. Reading, again, is going to be extremely effective to pick up lots and lots of vocabulary to improve these scores. And we do track these scores throughout year 7, year 10 and year 12. This one here would alert me because the skill score is very low. These are all real scores. So we would look at this and see if there was an issue with the assessments this child was doing, and they weren't able to improve their, they weren't able to either proofread and make mistakes in their proofreading or in their perceptual skills, that they weren't understanding the questions, misinterpreting the questions during assessments. I'll come back to that in a minute. Actually, I'll come back to that now. That low skill score, being that you can do something about that low skill score at the age your children are at the moment, because it's being developed, this kind of tracking skills. This website is particularly good. It's called I Can Learn, and it's got things like Spot the Difference. Spot the Difference is excellent for tracking skills because it requires you to look in one place, find something, and then look in the other place to see if it's the same. So this will develop perceptual skills, all of these games. There's lots of books you can do on Spot the Difference, maze games. It's all to do with how the eyes work. And if you get stronger, those connections in the brain do improve massively. Also talk to, if the skill score is really low, then you can talk to Miss Wright, or just email me and I'll put you in contact, or email Patty Kelly at the head of year if you're concerned about the low skill score. So it's either something we'll pick up, something you'll pick up, or you want to question, but it is something that does need looking at, especially if it starts to affect assessments. The non-verbal score doesn't really, we don't find that really affects much. Some students are really good at spatial awareness, others are not that good at spatial awareness. I want to move on now to looking at assessment at NYP and how we record assessment and report assessment at West Island. Anything that you want to know, there is more details on our internet. We have an internet and intranet. Intranet we call our VLE, or virtual learning environment, which is only available to students and parents at West Island School. But our internet page is wis.edu.hk. That has lots of information about our courses. And one of the bits of information, if you go to the menu there, Learning at WIS, you can see all about NYP assessments. There's lots of information there for you. Also the intranet or our VLE, you will be aware of this page. And on this page, when you're looking at assessment, you want to go to the farm page. So you click on the farm page. Now, you will not see this at the moment because this is what you get at the end of the semester. At the moment, your children's teachers are doing assessments, what we call summative assessment tests, and they're being given grades, and they're supposed to be given there's 4 strands in each subject, A, B, C, and D, and they will receive at least 1 grade in each of these subjects for A, B, C, and D. So at the end of the first semester, your child will have an A, B, C, and D grade. Now, this grade that they're given is called an overall level of achievement, or OLA, we call them. And what an OLA is we ask teachers at the start of February to decide on strand A, B, C, and D. And if you click into the subject assessment criteria here, this is available on our website, and it shows you what strand A, B, C, and D are assessing in each subject. So for language and literature, which is English, so A is analysing, B organising, C producing text, and D is using the language. So each strand is assessing something different. So your child will have at least 1 grade in each of these areas by February. They may have 2, they may have 3, but at the end in February, the teacher decides overall what is their level in each of those criteria. Now, all those 4 levels in each subject, A, B, C, and D, are collected together to give a subject grade. And here's the really confusing part. So you can see in this example here, individual societies, the highest grade highest level you can get, highest OLA you can get is 8, a score of 8. And you may have looked in and heard your children saying they've got an 8 in this subject or another subject. Those 8s are added together to give a maximum score of 32. If you look at that diagram there, that table there, it tells you at the bottom there, 32, that maximum score, scores you a grade 7. I understand this is confusing. You've got level 8 in all your assessments and you end up with a grade 7, because a grade 7 at IB is their maximum score. And the reason they've done this is because it's what all levels of the IB, a level 7 is the highest score. So this table helps you convert the overall levels of achievement they've got in different subjects into a subject grade. And the subject grades through year 7, 8, and 9, they don't necessarily get better in each get a higher grade, in each subject. What happens is the assessment criteria gets more challenging. So if a student gets a grade 6 in year 7, and a grade 6 in year 8, and a grade 6 in year 9, that's absolutely fine. That's what's expected to happen. They're not expected to progress in the grades. It's the assessment criteria that gets more difficult. They are being assessed on more difficult and more challenging criteria. So don't expect the grades to get higher year on year. This is fine getting the same grade all the time. Also, you can see on that page, we have self-management skills. So this is something we've had in place for a few years now, and what we're doing there is each of those stars represents a vital self-management skill for your child. So those are the 6 self-management skills there as an example of what you can see when you get your grades in year in February. So all the time the teacher is assessing, are your children arriving lessons on time, handling work which is acceptable, organised, notes, listening, acting, feedback, necessary equipment, on are they keeping focus in the class? And they, from that, they will click these stars on and off. And all that information is put into this diagram here, which is available on your child's wisdom page. So you can see this in the child's wisdom page. So you can see punctuality is absolutely fine there, but I've chosen one which is particularly low in different areas. But I would be concerned about not bringing correct equipment to class, not keeping focus, and to a certain extent meeting deadlines here. So this is from the teachers all together. And if you go to self-management skills on the wisdom page, you will be able to see this diagram for your child at the moment. Because we're just starting the end of the year, it may be pretty maximum in each of the subjects until your children are very well known by their teachers, and they may start getting more shape in this radar diagram. We are also getting partly through the year, we'll get our students to self-assess where they think they are on this diagram, on their self-management skills, and we'll assess this and see how they progress from year on year to see if they're improving in these skills all the time. So I said at the moment you won't see any grades in the grade summary when you go into wisdom. You'll see something like this, but you still can access the levels they have got so far. You can do that by going into the grades, going into the form and going into different subjects. So you may see, for example, here we've got subject. You may see that they've already done an assessment in, for example, English. Actually, this is creative arts. And you can see they've got a level 5 in criteria B and C. So this is summative assessment tests. So you can see grades as they go in, levels as they go in, but they haven't been summarized altogether. That will only happen at the end during February and at the end of the year. Do go in and have a look. You'll see a kind of a new a token rosette comes up on the form when there's a grade being entered recently. Okay, I think that is everything I wanted to go through during this presentation. I'm going to bring my panelists back. I can see that Miss Haworth, Clare Haworth, my fellow BP, has joined us. So Clare, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, and sorry it's a little bit late, parents, but I've been sat listening. Didn't do so well on some of the maths questions, Mike, but managed the skills bit. So yeah, it was great to join in and great to listen. So yeah, pre-16 VP, work alongside Mike, work with Guy and Patty as part of the pastoral team, and also MYP coordinator. So lovely to be here and to answer any questions that people may have.
Yeah, so you can see at the bottom, thanks Claire, you can see at the bottom there, we've got Q&As there. So we've got about 15-20 minutes left if you want to ask some questions. Just put them in there. Is there anything in there? I don't know if Guy and Patty have been looking at this.
Yeah, so Mike, I had a great question from David, who said that how do we improve on a maths score in the tests, in the mid-years tests? So
yeah, one thing I didn't say.
That.
Yeah, it's a really good question. One thing I didn't say is that there is no preparation for these tests, and it's much better if children don't prepare for these tests. We get a more accurate score, and also we do not use these test scores externally. We don't report on these tests. They are literally 30 minutes, and we can't it doesn't define your child. The reason we use these particular computer adapted tests is because they are a 45-minute test that, you know, they're not high stakes at all. It just gives us some information about your child which we can use, that will help them, especially things like skill scores, not understanding their skill scores, understanding their vocab's a bit low for their age and they need to read more. But one thing, the maths could be low, and the answer is, how can you improve on the maths? It's just practice more maths, practice more problem solving is good. And you can get books on problem solving skills, just thinking about how you go about that problem rather than just doing the normal algebra questions. Get your brain thinking in that kind of mathematical way. Yeah.
Mike, I just want to echo, and I'm reading parental comments about the midges results, and it's just reinforcing what you say, that it's just another little part of the information that gives us some insight into the holistic profile or learning styles of a child. So it's not to worry about if your child is dipping in an area. It's about practicing that. So I think that's really important, because Junho is just saying, based on the midges result, does WIS provide an individual support program? So Junho, what I'd say, as Mike said, is if you do have any particular concerns about a particular score with that, where your child is low and you're seeing that they're struggling, contact us, contact Gail Wright, who's head of individual needs, contact Patty as your head of year, and we can have a conversation with you about some ways that we can support your child. We do have strategies for school, where some young people come and do some work with the individual needs team to practice these skills that Mike's been sharing with you. But we would do that based on an understanding of your child's needs.
Yeah, and also if the score is high, we also have a highly able coordinator who will look at those scores, and the teachers will be very aware that your children's score are very high. We do talk about this with staff, and they're quite aware of the scores that your children have got, and they adapt their teaching, they differentiate their teaching based on some of these scores. But again, as we keep saying, they're only a piece of the information that we're getting about your children. They're a start of a conversation, we like to say.
And the self-management table, that diagram, Andrea, you can access on the farm page for your child, and where you've got that on there, Mike. Then how do we read the self-management skills table? So it's really just a visual to know where your child is managing themselves and areas where they just need to work on in a little bit more detail.
Yeah, if you go onto the VLE, you will see there is a tile there which says self-management skills, and just click that and you will be able to see the strengths and areas for development for your child.
Yeah.
Like a question that we had during the presentation, and apologies if this was already clarified, can you just confirm to the parents how they may have received their child's mid-YES results, please?
Yeah, we emailed them out individually. If you haven't received them, it may be that your child didn't do the assessment, and we have had catch-up tests, but sometimes the students haven't gone to those catch-up tests, or they've been away for the catch-up tests. So in that case, just email me, and we'll get if they've done that test, we'll resend the results to you. If they haven't done that test, we'll make sure they do.
Yeah. There's a question here. Are the children aware of the 4 different criterions they are tested on? Thank you, Sonu. My child seems to be confused on how the assessment differs. The children do get shared a rubric, Sonu, with the levels, with a descriptor of how those levels are broken down per subject. And if your child is still unsure, then please get them to chat with the teacher. just to get some clarification if they need to. Any other questions, Patty or Guy, that you feel we can share? Just going through them.
Yeah, sorry, just bear with me.
There was one here. Can you let me know the average NYP score and top 5% score at WIS? Mike, I don't know what you would say about that.
Yeah, average is around, it slightly differs between different subjects, but it converges in terms of grade level are different, because grade is out of 7 and level. But the level is somewhere around about 6 is the average score, and for grade at the end of it, it's somewhere around 5, 5.5 maybe is overall.
I think there's one thing to say, Mike. Guy, Patty, agree with me on this, or your points of view, but I think from a parent point of view, the levels that your children get after every assessment, you just think of them as a step and as a way to inform progress, because what we don't want are children benchmarking themselves against what another child has got. You know, I got a level this, you got a level that. You work at the level that's best for you, understanding what your learning styles are. You know, you might be a young person that might be better at communicating information verbally, and then grow in that written evidence, and the same with maths. So when you're looking at the levels, read it in line with the rubric that your child gets. You know, go onto the farm, look at what that level is about, and talk to your child about what they're working on within that level. What are the skills? What are the approaches to learning? Because otherwise what your child is doing is just reading a level and then not unpacking it against what that level actually means.
Yeah, and just to show you this again, that if you notice there in each of those criteria, the criteria are separated into strands. Strand 1 on the top there, strand 1 and strand 2. What it will say on there is that what your child can do, the student demonstrates substantial acquisition and development of the skills and techniques of the art form studied, and it also says what's the next target, if you like, what's the level 6. So what's the difference there? And there may just be a couple of words you can see on that example. It's just excellent acquisition. So that's what they're working towards on there.
And you should have an overview of the units on the farm, so you should be able to access those. Some of you are asking about the outlines for the courses, so they're accessible via your farm, so you can go in and look at those.
Yeah, when you click into the subjects, it will tell you the outline of the subjects, what your there's also another thing available to you called the CAT, and the CAT will tell you the sequence of subjects that your child is doing in each subject.
And just following on from what Mike and Claire were saying there, in terms of feedback, teachers will give specific feedback of how to get to the next level. So for example, in a criteria D in science would be a report kind of based assignment. So students would really work on skills like referencing, how to label a graph, how to do a table. So these are skills that are evolving, because the NYP is a conceptual learning in which we're evolving throughout the years. So by looking at a grade on itself, it's really not giving the full picture. It's really saying you could have scored high in a particular strand in the feedback, but maybe need to do some work in another strand to bring the overall grade up. So it's something that the feedback that the teachers give helps to move students forward in that.
And thank you, David, for your feedback as well, because we do realise that we have parents new to West Island and new to NYP. Yeah, I agree, knowing more about the levels and knowing what they are. So look out for an invite for another workshop from me in terms of NYP coordinator, about just unpacking what those levels mean, and that overview of it. So yeah, absolutely, there'll be some further workshops on that. Any other questions? I think, Mike, you talked about improvement of non-verbal skills, didn't you, before? How to improve that?
Yeah, it's a good question. You asked me, yeah, maybe working with their hands, building things, Lego maybe.
Lego's good, yeah.
Understand that spatial awareness, more kind of artwork, those kind of things. When if you think about non-verbal is information that you may want to portray, which is not using words or numbers. So everything else is non-verbal. How we communicate non-verbally, by graphs, by charts, artwork, there's something you make. So anything you can do with your hands, which involves spatial awareness or some artwork, it's great for non-verbal.
Yeah. So that looks like all the questions from parents, some great questions.
Yeah, really good.
And over to you, Mike, if there's any last things that you want to say.
Yeah, well, thank you for joining us tonight. We are always really happy to get communications from you about your students. This is not about individual students here. Do read that booklet that I've linked you in on there. It will help you understand the strengths and areas for development for your child. And we're here ready to communicate if you want to ask any questions whatsoever. Whether it be more support on for individual needs, or whether it be gifted work, then we're here. So anytime you want to connect us, just talk to us. And thank you. It looks like we got about 84 families join us tonight, which is great. And hopefully we'll see you very soon. Thank you to my panelists, Guy, Patty, and Claire.
Have a good evening.
Good evening.
Thank
And
you.
bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Claire.